Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I am back in the booth again with you for another sneak peek video preview for this week's new release here on Say with Jay. This week's new release is Just a Cowboy's Best Friend. It's the second book in Jessie Gussman's brand new Western Sweet romance series, The Flyboys of Sweetbriar Ranch. Now, I'm very excited to tell you about this story, and we're going to have a live reading in just a bit. But first, as Jessie has done in her last several new releases, she's included a dish within the story, and I'm going to be making that dish for you today. Yes, it is time for another segment of Cooking with Jay. Today's recipe is something a little different for me. I'm going international on you guys. Now, I think you can look at me and know I like food. I like food from around the world. I like Mexican food. I like Italian food. I like all kinds of Asian food, Chinese, Japanese, Thai, you name it. But one that I love, but I don't get a lot of around here is good Greek food. I love gyros. Sorry, zoned out a little bit there. Now I'm all hungry. But anyway, um, today, though, I'm making something a whole lot simpler. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, if you remember, when we made our crock pot cream cheese chicken chili, I mentioned then that I didn't know if I had come across a recipe that had a higher taste to simplicity ratio. And this one is a super, super close second. Today, we're going to be making Greek chicken lemon rice soup, also known as Avgolemono soup. I hope I'm saying that right. There's a G in there somewhere, but it's like the G in euro. Okay, I've got to get a euro soon, but that's beside the point. Today, we're going to make this soup, and I promise you it will knock your socks off. And it is surprisingly simple, shockingly so. To make it, it's got an incredibly short ingredient list as well, and it only takes about 20 minutes. So this is how you make it, and as always, don't worry about trying to capture the ingredients and the amounts. They're going to be listed in the description of this video down below. You may have to hit show all or whatever it says to see the full description. But let's get started. Here is how you make Greek chicken lemon soup, Avgolemono soup. Okay, as you can see here, the ingredient list is really small. You're basically going to need a half of a sweet onion, chopped, roughly a tablespoon of olive oil to saute that onion in. You're going to need 6 cups of chicken broth. Also, fun fact, I did not realize that this standard carton of chicken broth is only 4 cups. I've made this a couple of times, don't know how I didn't know that, but I had to make an emergency grocery store run to get some more. Anyway, you're going to need 3/4 of a cup of long grain white rice. You're going to want to rinse that, which I'll talk about in just a second. You also need 2 cups of cooked chicken, diced. A rotisserie chicken here works great. That's what I'm using. You're going to need 3 eggs, 3 large eggs, and this is very, very important. They need to be at room temperature. If you're using store-bought eggs, about an hour before you plan to make it, just set the eggs out so that they can slowly rise up to room temperature. And lastly, you're going to need between 1/3 and 1/2 a cup of fresh lemon juice. Every single variation of this recipe that I found online said how critically important it was that you not use bottled lemon juice, that you use fresh squeezed. Also, the amount of lemon juice, between a third and a half a cup should really be dependent on how much you like lemon. I love lemon, love it, love it. When I made this the first time, I made it with a half a cup. My son and daughter-in-law felt like that was a little bit much, so this time I'm only making it with a third of a cup. For me, a third of a cup is about 2 lemons, a half is about 3. All right, let's get started. Now, after you rinse your rice, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but you're going to want to heat a Dutch oven on medium-high heat. Add your tablespoon-ish of olive oil, and then your onions. You really only want to cook the onions until they've got a little bit of color, browning just a little bit. Now, while that's doing that, let me say something more about the rice. It is very important that you do rinse your rice really well. Put it in a wire colander, run cold water over it until the water underneath runs clear. You really want to get rid of all that, rice starch dust on each grain. So rinse that off really well and let it sit while we're cooking our onions. Again, you really only want to let them get just a little bit of color to them because they're going to continue to cook in the soup. Once you've got your onions looking about like this, you're going to want to add your 6 cups of chicken broth and bring that to a boil. Once your chicken broth and onions are boiling, you want to add your rinsed rice and give that a good stir. Cut your heat down to a simmer, add the lid, and let that cook covered for 15 minutes. After your 15 minutes are over, you want to add your chicken in to the simmering soup. Essentially here, you're doing that to let your chicken warm up. So add your chicken, give it a good stir, replace the cover, and let it continue to simmer for about 5 minutes. Now we're in the home stretch. While the chicken is warming up, you want to crack your 3 eggs into a bowl and add in your lemon juice, and you want to whisk that very, very well until it's nice and frothy. After the 5 minutes, it's time for the only tricky part to this recipe, and it's not that bad. If you were to just take this lemon-egg mixture and dump it in hot soup while it's cooking, what's likely to happen is the eggs are going to instantly cook, solidify, and curdle, and you'll be left with egg drop soup. Probably would taste pretty good, but it's not at all what we're going for. So you want to take the soup completely off your heating element, and you're going to slowly add 1 cup, at least 1 cup, of the hot broth from the soup into your bowl with the lemon and eggs, whisking it continually. This is called tempering your eggs. Essentially what you're doing, the hot broth is cooking the eggs very slowly and bringing that temperature up, but without giving them the chance to curdle. Once you've added a cup or 2 of the hot broth and whisked it in really well, you're going to want to reverse that and add the egg mixture back into your soup, whisking as well, pouring it very slowly. And what it's going to do is add this silky, creamy texture with no cream. It's just going to blow your mind. It is so velvety smooth. And that's it. This is what it looks like, your Greek chicken lemon rice Avgolemono soup. All right, that is all there is to it. I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but I cannot say strongly enough how amazing this stuff is. It is fantastic for cold and rainy days, and it cooks quickly enough that you can do it during the week too. As always, I hope you guys will try it, and when you do, let us know how it goes in the comments. I promise you, if you like lemon at all. You will not regret this. Okay, now let's get back to our new release for this week, Just a Cowboy's Best Friend. Just a Cowboy's Best Friend is the story of Deuce and Teagan. We met them in Just a Cowboy's Convenient Marriage, book 1 of this series, 2 weeks ago, and they are inseparable, lifelong best friends, and are apparently the only 2 people in all of Sweetwater who don't know that they belong together. Well, with the Peacemakers quilting / matchmaking club kind of in unofficial retirement now that Miss Charlene has gotten married, Miss April, who we also met in the previous book, decides to take up the mantle, so to speak. And she finds out, to much hilarity, that matchmaking is a little bit harder than it looks. In the meantime, will Deuce and Teagan figure out that they do indeed belong together when they're faced with a crisis that could separate them for a very long time? Of course, you're going to have to come back here to find out this coming Friday. But for now, here is a live preview reading from Just a Cowboy's Best Friend. I hope you enjoy it. Come back and see us this Friday here on Say with Jay.
That is such a cool place. I've always wanted to stop and look at it.
Deuce leaned forward and looked out the windshield to where Teagan pointed. That old abandoned house? Vines covered the side of the weather-beaten boards, and the roof looked like it was ready to cave in at any moment.
Yeah, someone lived there once. Doesn't it just kind of draw you in a sad and almost eerie kind of way?
No, can't say I've ever even had the thought I might want to stop, Deuce said as he put his foot on the brake and put his turn signal on as well.
I didn't mean we had to stop,
Teagan said immediately, glancing over at him across the bench seat in his pickup. Do you have somewhere else you need to go today? It was Saturday, and she'd ridden with him 2 hours north of Sweetwater while he delivered a horse that he had trained to the fellow who had bought him. He had another pair of horses to pick up, and Teagan had just come along to keep him company. She knew he preferred to have her along on trips like this. It made the time go faster, and he couldn't think of anyone else he'd rather be with. The least he could do was to stop at some run-down old house, just to satisfy her curiosity. He'd never be able to go by this house again without thinking of Teagan. He had no idea where she came up with some of the crazy things she thought of. But it was enough for him to know that her brain just worked differently than his did, and somehow they seemed to be compatible anyway. Or maybe they'd just figured out long ago that different didn't mean bad, and they enjoyed the things that made each other unique. He didn't know. He didn't spend much time thinking about their relationship, just that Teagan was odd sometimes, and he liked her that way.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe we're actually stopping.
The excitement in her voice was obvious and a little contagious. He tried to see the old run-down house from her eyes. True, someone probably had lived there once.
I wonder why they had to leave it. Why did they sell? Why would they just walk away from their home?
You face the North Dakota winter each year, the dark and the cold and the constant wind. I can't believe you even asked that. He didn't mean it to be mean. Just to his mind, there were a million different reasons why people would leave. It was why people stayed that sometimes made him wonder.
Maybe she was a woman with 8 kids and her husband died, and she couldn't afford to feed them, so she had to farm them out and turn to prostitution in order to survive.
Teagan's voice held a bit of whimsy. That's cheerful.
She shot a glance at him, the kind she usually did when he was being goofy when she was in one of her nostalgic moods. "It's true," he defended himself. "Or maybe some man lost his wife and he couldn't stand to face life without her, so he left the home and farm they'd worked on all their lives together and walked into the ocean, never to return."
More likely, he got to the ocean and was so tired from walking all that distance, he lay down and was drowned.
Or their farm was so prosperous that they were able to walk away from it without having to sell it, and they moved to Florida, enjoying the sun and the sand and the surf, and never saw another snowflake in their entire lives. And they spent their last years holding hands and staring into each other's eyes, thinking about how blessed they were to have each other.
Or they left the house and went to Florida because they couldn't stand the snow, and she found someone richer with more hair and less belly, and left her husband alone in a nursing home while she jetted off to Hawaii before settling in a villa in France with her new love, who happened to own a vineyard and winery.
No, someone who lived in North Dakota would never be happy in France on a winery.
Why not? Actually, living in North Dakota could drive you to want to live on a winery.
You love it here.
She grabbed her door latch and yanked, but she didn't get out until he answered her. That's because my best friend is here. I still think we ought to move to Arizona or Texas, someplace where it's hot more than it's cold. She laughed, knowing he was joking. Mostly. It was true about his best friend. She was the best thing about North Dakota. And if she ever decided to move somewhere else, she wouldn't have to twist his arm to go with her. Mississippi sounded like a good spot. He got out of his door and instead of walking around the front of the truck, walked around the back, looking in the trailer and checking on his horses. "Hey there, pretty girl," he said softly, sticking a hand up so the mare could sniff his fingers. The gelding was farther back, and he checked on him too, murmuring a few more words. Rather than walking over to the house herself, Teagan had walked to the back of the trailer, knowing he would check on his horses, and was waiting for him there.
"They look good?" she asked.
"They'll be fine. It's cool enough that they can stand for a bit." Teagan loved horses as much as he did, but her love involved watching them and doing whatever he told her to do with them. She didn't work with them much, just hung out with him and helped him where he needed it. He was the same with her baking business, hanging out at the farmer's market or at her house on Monday night, rolling out pie dough or stirring a fruit and sugar mixture for pies. He had to admit he wasn't much of a baker, but it was like anything else. It was fun as long as Teagan was doing it with him. The wind blew, rustling the grass and making something creak from the direction of the house. Maybe a piece of metal on the roof was loose?
"How old do you think it is?"
"I don't know. We could probably find out. There are probably records at the courthouse. Less than 100 years? He was guessing because he really had no idea. But it was a wood-sided house, so it couldn't have been that long. The paint had long since worn off, and the boards were dark gray. Eventually they'd rot, and the entire thing would fall in. Weeds grew up around the porch, and scrub brush poked through a few cracks in the porch floor. They stood at the bottom of the porch steps. They looked sturdy enough to walk on. He studied the boards, deciding he was right about their ability to hold their weight before looking overhead, to make sure the roof wasn't sagging to the point where it was going to fall on him when he walked up.
"Are you sure it's safe?"
Teagan asked. "No, but isn't that the point of an adventure? You don't know exactly how it's going to go. You just embark on it because you know it's going to be fun."
"I thought it would be fun to come over here and feel it."
There she went,
doing something that was very different from him. He didn't feel things. He observed them. What he could see, what he could hear, what he could touch, what he could figure out. She had some kind of way of observing the world that he didn't, through some kind of feelings is the only thing he could figure out. It wasn't bad, just different. You go ahead and feel it. I'll keep an eye on the ceiling. They worked well together when they respected each other's differences.
Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.